thoughts of my enemies. You invite me to the table and you tell me just to sit and feast. You are not afraid when the terror screaming loud at me. You've overcome and you're the God of victory. I'm dancing on the grave that once held me down, dancing on the chains that are laying on the ground. I'm dancing up the dark, lighting up the night. Your joy becomes a weapon. I am here to fight, fight, fight. I am here to fight, fight, fight. When I walk through the valley of the shadow, I will not fear death. I know you're by my side and you'll never leave me by myself. So even when I'm weary, you are calling me to come and rest. 'Cause you cannot be stopped, you have already defeated hell. You cannot be stopped, you have already defeated hell. Oh, I'm dancing on the grave that once held me bound, dancing on the chains that are laying on the ground. I'm dancing up the dark, lighting up the night. Your joy becomes a weapon. Oh, I'm dancing on the grave that once held me bound, dancing on the chains that are laying on the ground. I'm dancing up the dark, lighting up the night. Your joy becomes a weapon. And I am here to fight, fight, fight. Oh, oh, oh. And I am here to fight, fight, fight. Oh, oh, oh. The enemy may be all around me, but I'm running free, 'cause you set me free. The enemy may be all around me, but I'm running free, 'cause you set me free. The enemy may be all around me, but I'm running free, 'cause you set me free. The enemy may be all around me, but I'm running free, 'cause you set me free. The enemy may be all around me, but I'm running free, 'cause you set me free. The enemy may be all around me, but I'm running free, 'cause you set me free. I'm dancing on the grave that once held me bound, dancing on the chains that are laying on the ground. I'm dancing up the dark, lighting up the night. Your joy becomes a weapon. Oh, I'm dancing on the grave that once held me bound, dancing on the chains that are staying on the ground. I'm dancing up the dark, lighting up the night. Your joy becomes a weapon. And I am here to fight, fight, fight. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, and I am here to fight, fight, fight. Oh, oh, oh. Yeah, I am here to fight, fight, fight. Oh, oh, oh. Oh, I am here to fight, fight, fight. Oh, oh, oh.
Hello, Cornerstone. My name is Maddie Rayleigh, and I am so honored to welcome you to a very special Mother's Day service online this morning. Before the pandemic, I had the privilege of being on the worship team and working with the kids team. And though I do miss seeing you week to week, God has been doing amazing things while we've been separate, but not alone. As you may have seen online, we have new church merch for all of you guys. All of the proceeds are going to the COVID-19 Relief Fund, which exists to help support our local community and our Cornerstone family. If you're interested in purchasing any merch, email us at info@cornerstoneatx.com, or you can send us a private message on Instagram or Facebook. Also, we want to thank you for being such a generous and faithful church. Don't forget, you can still give online through the app, or you can text to give. We love you, and we are so excited for y'all to hear from our very own Pastor Dan and some very special Cornerstone mamas today. Happy Mother's Day.
Good morning. Happy Mother's Day. We are so glad that you've decided to join us on a historic day in so many different ways. First, it's our very first Mother's Day. Second, It's our very first Mother's Day in a pandemic, everybody. It is so crazy what we're all experiencing together. And I wanted to make sure that I stayed in my lane of excellence, and I was not going to do this message just by myself. I was smart enough to know I'm going to bring in some experts. So I brought in some awesome ladies from Cornerstone to help us with today's topic, to talk about motherhood and what it's really like. So the first question we would love to pose is this. What's the one thing that if you could help men to understand this about being a mother, it would change the game completely?
I would say one of the biggest things, or maybe frustrations as a mom, or that you feel misunderstood with men, is just the amount of things that are on our plate and on our minds, because so much of it is unseen. What we're doing and even what we're thinking, and just being ultimately responsible for not just cleaning rooms or packing lunches or the things that are seen, but the concerns about their emotional well-being or their spiritual growth or all of these elements. And that's not to say that dads don't care, but sometimes I'm not sure that they see the whole big picture of all that we're carrying in a single day.
Hold on. Are you suggesting that sometimes men don't pay attention?
I would just say they're compartmentalized.
Yes, they're focused. They're very
Yes,
intentional.
they are.
That is good. See, one of the things I would love to talk about is because I can't imagine what it would be like to be a mom today. First, because I've never been a mom, but just thinking back on my own mother's experience, she was a mom in a town with only 781 people in Salisbury, New Hampshire. Okay, so let's just say maybe there's 200 other mothers that she's comparing herself with about whether or not I was a good Little League baseball player, or whether or not my grades were good enough or my clothes were good enough. But in today's culture, as moms, you guys are faced with the comparison game that's global with social media. It has got to be so different and create so many more hurdles that you have to face, because now you're not competing with just Betty down the block. You're now competing with someone in LA who's teaching their 1.5-year-old Mandarin, and they're doing jujitsu lessons as they're teaching them to cook, you know? And so in that culture, how do you guys deal with that? And what would you say to the moms that probably can get caught up in the comparison game?
So one of the tools that I use against the comparison game is reminding myself constantly of my purpose, kind of like Hillary mentioned, and then with scripture. You know, I'm a pretty new mom, so I don't really struggle much yet with comparing how I raise my kid. But Hillary mentioned purpose, and it reminded me. You know, I think about like in the book of Micah, when he asked him, "What does the Lord require of me? But to love mercy, and to walk justly, and to walk humbly with your God." And we also deal a lot, you know, in our culture in comparison, and also with labels. And so especially when you're a mom and you're a wife, and maybe you have another profession you know, a day job, I often remind myself when I go before the Lord, I'm not Trent's wife or Sadie's mom or a doctor or whatever else it may be, but my ultimate purpose in life is that I'm a child of God. And that personally helps me with the comparison game and everyone else's expectations of us, to remind myself, what are God's expectations of me? And that's kind of why I mentioned that passage in Micah, but God's expectation of me is to walk humbly with him, and to love mercy, and to act justly, and then to love and serve my husband, and to be there for Sadie, and everything else comes next. And so that's just a way that one of the tools that I've used for a very long time to help myself not compare my life to others.
I like that.
That's really good. I think it's really easy to fall into that trap, and you have to be really on your spiritual A game. I've read that motherhood is probably the most competitive sport on the planet. And when I consider that, I think, why is that? I don't know. I could speculate a lot on it, but I think maybe women aren't feeling as fulfilled in their purpose. Maybe they're living a little bit vicariously through their children and wanting them to accomplish things that they couldn't accomplish. But really, I think it's spiritual. I think we have to go back to who God says we are and be fully confident in knowing that God gave us the exact qualities he knew our kids would need. And so we have something that our kids need that another mom doesn't have. So I think it's just really staying in the Word and standing on his promises and who he says we are.
I agree. Yeah.
That is such a good way to put it, and stand on his promise and stay in his word. Because when we get outside of the lanes that God's given us to run in, it really gets exhausting. Because you're running against a current that you were never designed to run against. And so you're wearing yourself out for no purpose. And it kind of highlights when you go back to Paul in Philippians 4 when he says, whether I've had a lot, whether I've had a little, it doesn't matter. I've learned to be content. And I really believe that in our culture today, that's a huge problem. I know I struggle with it. You get into your head about, is this good enough? Am I providing enough for my kids?
Right.
Well, what if my kids don't get into a D1 school? Well, wait a minute. I didn't go to a D1 school. And I turned out amazing. No. But you get in your head about some of those things, and as you get in your head about it, it just seems to snowball and get worse and worse and worse. And I love what you said about just staying in the Word and knowing your purpose. Because one thing I see in this generation for sure is that many of them have identity crises and multiple ones of them. So as moms, how do you handle that? Managing the home, seeing multiple identity crises. Like, we have 4 children and they're all so different, but you have to handle different personalities all different ways.
If I'm going to answer for our family or for our personal experience, I would say seeing the value in the differences and in the different personalities, because you and I are very different, but we both bring value to our family, our community, our relationship. And God made each of those children unique in the way that they are, just like he made us unique in their parents. And when he created that soul, he said, I'm going to give Eve Underhill to Dan and Kelly Underhill because that's who she needs to parent her. And I'm going to give Eve to Dan and Kelly because that's who they need to raise. And I think...
Especially with Logan, he did that too, right?
Yes. Oh, for sure. I was definitely not
love
as
that
strong
kid.
as a person as I am now before I had Logan. Like, he brought out my inner warrior, mama bear, whatever you want to call it. He taught me I had inner strength. I always thought of myself as a weak person, weak-minded, physically weak, all those things. And he taught me how to be strong.
Not everybody watching this probably knows exactly what that means. What do you mean he brought that strength out? How did he bring that strength out for you?
For me specifically, because he was stronger than I was. From the beginning, he felt everything fully, completely, intensely. Joy, anger, frustration, sadness. He was very full. And I am kind of a go with the flow kind of person. And so he kind of ruled the house until I realized I've got to get control of this kid for myself and for him, because when he felt out of control, he needed me to be in control.
That's good.
And so I had to learn skills for controlling myself and helping him learn how to control himself.
That is so good. Logan is definitely either you lead Logan or Logan will lead you. Okay. And I love him. And you got to understand, he's me crammed down into an 11-year-old body. Okay. And so it's amazing and challenging sometimes, but that challenge has been so fruitful in our lives. It's been there have been so many people that I would even encourage you, as moms and as families, or even if you don't have children, you still need mentors and guides, because there were people along the way for us personally
Yeah.
that we couldn't take enough time to say thank you for all they poured into our lives, into our children.
Right.
Like, that's the value of the church. Making sure you're connected and rooted to the community of people who love you and are committed to you, but they're also helping your family be raised in a healthy, accountable, truth-telling environment
Right.
that helps them be all that God's called them to be.
Right. To speak life into those kids and not just have that mentality that kids should be seen and not heard. And I think it's so important that we as a church family, that we communicate to parents, to children themselves. God says children are a blessing. And that's what we need to parent from, the fact that they are a blessing. They are not a problem to be fixed, a behavior to be fixed or modified. They are a person to be built. When we are given a child, we're supposed to be an ambassador from God to that child, that this is who you are, this is who God made you to be, not, oh my God, you're a nightmare. Oh, stop doing that. Go to your room.
Yeah.
You lose Xbox. Like, speak life into those kids, and the church should be the place where they feel the most welcome and the most encouraged and able to be who they are.
Something I was going to add, it kind of falls in line with that and what Kelly was saying, just in talking about having different personalities and just the different tools you can use with each kid. We do have a lot of tools, and especially now we have so many tools and tests and understanding personalities and understanding people. And one thing that I always go back to when I do compare and maybe feel like a failure, or even just comparing like what I wish I had done to what I actually did do, or where I hoped my kids would be but they're not, is just remembering that no matter where I lack, God will make up for that, and ultimately wherever they're supposed to be, He will get them there in spite of me. Maybe because of me, and maybe because of the good tools that I used or the things that I did do right. But ultimately, like, I'm a child of God, so are they, and He'll fulfill my purpose as well as theirs. And so it kind of takes a little bit of pressure off to, do your best, obviously, but we're not going to be perfect.
I think that's a powerful thing to be reminded of, that each one of us, we don't have it all figured out. When we think back to our parents, they didn't know what they were doing either. And that's not throwing shade on our parents at all. They were just doing the best they could and then course correcting. And that's something we probably need to remind ourselves of. Nobody has this figured out. Nobody's already done it. You become an expert once you've done it. Okay? But even looking back, like now, I look back on my parents and just go, oof, man, that was a tough act. That was a lot to have to deal with, and they were just holding on, just going for a wild ride. And so I think it's important, even for children that are watching this, cut your parents some slack. They're doing the best they can. Now, don't you dare go back to them and say, Pastor Dan said, you don't know what you're doing. He said it. That's not the point. But just let's give each other grace to run this race, because none of us have done it before, and none of us have it all figured out. And even probably a good point to bring up is that our parents, we probably need to give them more grace, because as you go on in life, things change, seasons change. And now as adult children that have children, we sometimes have to manage our mothers, grandmothers, and as they age, we need to do that with honor. And we need to do that with dignity and respect. I would love to ask this question, Sarah, of you, because you're the newest mom. As far as Sadie's 5 months old, right? Okay. She's 5 months old. And there had to be some fear, or I've heard anxiety of the unknown when it comes to having a baby. Could you talk to maybe the ladies who are not yet moms, but have that fear or that anxiety? How did it work out for you, and what did you see God do through that?
Yeah, so I definitely had some fears, and they may have been a little non-traditional. Admittedly, being a mom wasn't something that I dreamed about. It wasn't like a little girl or even a college girl dream. I always wanted to be married, but I didn't really necessarily know I wanted to be a mom. And after we had been married for about a year, I started praying about that. And I said, God, we're approaching the 1 year mark. I have no desire to be pregnant and have a baby. I said, so, my ask would be either for you to change my heart or for you to exert your sovereign will over mine and have your way. And so a couple months later, when I found out I was pregnant, honestly, I was a little bummed out. And that's hard to talk about. I had a lot of guilt throughout my pregnancy for feeling that way, and not feeling as excited as I think a lot of women feel. And so, I share that with a sense of empathy and sensitivity. And one of the reasons I felt so guilty was there's so many women and people that I actually knew that were struggling to have a baby. And so to be kind of a non-traditional woman in that place of pregnancy that's usually so exciting and et cetera. I just didn't feel those things. And even up until delivery day, I really struggled with that. And my fallback in that time was always, God, this is what I prayed for. This is how you answered. And it was a constant reminder of his sovereignty over my life. And I think whether you're single and wanting to be married, or you're struggling with infertility, or you're a mom of a 2-year-old and you don't like your 2-year-old right now, I think no matter where you are, reminding yourself that if you live in a place where your heart is surrendered to the will of God, that you can always fall back on that. And so that is how I handled my quote unquote fear during that time, of feeling like I'm not going to be a good girl mom for this little girl. I don't have all the things that you should have leading up to a delivery day. I don't, all those insecurities and feeling like I wasn't equipped, but that God wanted me to be a parent, so here we go. I think that lesson and that belief and understanding of God's sovereignty in your life, I think that's universal. Whether you're a man, a woman, a single person, or someone, no matter who you are, I think that's universal. And so that's the biggest thing God taught me throughout my pregnancy, and what I have to remind myself of every week.
That is so good. And you're right. Whether you're a guy, you're a girl, you're a mom, you're a dad, you're none of the above.
Yeah.
Which I don't know who that is. But the sovereignty of who God is trumps everything. Because even coming into your pregnancy, I remember we had talked a little bit about, wait a minute, I'm a tomboy. What if I have a girl?
Yeah.
And there was these interesting conversations. First of all, we were able to have those in a community of people where we could bounce those ideas off, which the value of that is just indescribable.
Where it's safe to say, I'm not feeling comfortable, I'm worried. Like I know the girl mom thing, the boy mom thing, people struggle with different sexes. I never struggled with what sex the child was, but when I got the child and the personality wasn't what I expected, because I had 2 very laid back children going into my 3rd born, I thought, I am not the right mom for this child. He needs someone so much stronger than me who can just keep him in line, teach him the right things, help him. And I had to remind myself, like I had a picture in my mind that I know is from the Holy Spirit. And he was like, it's not like you went to a breeder and sat with 6 puppies and picked the wrong one. The creator of the universe said, this is who I'm giving to you. This is who you need to raise, and this is who needs to be raised by you. And I think it goes back to the sovereignty of God, the redemption of all our lives through every part of our lives, how he can use the things that we do wrong and we don't do right to build them, to grow them, to accomplish his will in the world.
You just made a really cool statement. God knew who they needed to raise them and who you needed to raise you. Because as a parent, you get raised. Your level of leadership, your level of discipline, your focus, your intentionality, your accountability, everything just rises on that. That is so good.
And then when we even found out that I was having a girl, that was hard too. I always imagined myself being a boy mom. And I remember actually talking to Kelly about this and opening up to her about it. And she told me something that I had never considered before, and that God is sovereign over even, not just the gender, but the order in which you have your children. And that whoever, this little girl is going to be an incredible big sister and an incredible oldest child. But the whole gender reveal was really tough. It wasn't Instagram worthy at all. There were tears for 24 hours. My sweet husband, I took it out on him, and I was mad at him for his response. And he said, I think you're actually really upset and you're taking it out on me. And he was right. So, but in that process of thinking about, whenever I'm scared of something, I tend to ask God, okay, why am I scared of this? And I think about my insecurities, because I think our insecurities are tightly bound to our fears. Mm-hmm. And so it opened up a world for me of things that I needed to grow in, whether it be my relationship with my own mother, my relationship with my dad, my relationship with other women, and just friendships or lack thereof along the way, and things that are just really hard about being a woman, and just feeling insecure in womanhood and not thinking that I would be a good mom to a girl. And then lastly, being really honest with myself, or the Holy Spirit being very honest with me. And I remember he said, I think you thought you'd be a boy mom because it sounded really easy. And maybe he's right, good, bad, or indifferent. But I realized that he was probably right in that I was just kind of scared of having a girl and feeling inadequate, insecure, and all the things that it might demand of me. But like Kelly said, God, for whatever reason, thinks that I needed a daughter and that I needed Sadie first. And again, going back on my fallback, that he's sovereign in all of those things, and feeling grateful that, I have a healthy, beautiful girl.
So I was very much of a tomboy growing up, and I had the same fears of having girls. I totally pictured myself to have all boys. And I wasn't necessarily sad when I found out I had a girl, but I had the same thoughts, just thinking I'm not really cut out for this, and kind of confused. And consequently, I had 3 girls, and I do have a boy too. I'm very blessed to have both, and I would just encourage you in that it has turned out to be one of literally the greatest gifts. Mm-hmm. So it comes full circle.
Yeah.
So God does actually know what he's doing. Oddly enough.
Sure.
We'll roll into this question, so I'm coming to you, Hillary. Okay. In today's landscape, blended families are a reality. And not only a reality, but they are very prevalent. That has to bring different challenges. That has to bring different solutions and different strategies to the table of parenting, of being a mom, and handling those things. Can you speak to what you've experienced and what you'd encourage others? Because this affects many families, and they probably love, how do I handle this?
Yes, I do think it's very prevalent in today's world, and it brings a lot of complexities, but it also brings so much more abundant blessings to your life. And so, for one, we have to approach it from that standpoint. But to really address that question, I feel like I have to talk a little bit about how I was brought up, and my mom being adopted and being very close with my grandparents and being an instrumental part of our upbringing. They taught us unconditional and chosen love, to my best interpretation of how Jesus would have it. And so going into being a blended family, just knowing I'm choosing to love more kids, there's just more love to go around. And I think children are a blessing, and they're made in the image of God, each child, whether they're biological or unbiological. And as we choose to love them, we must fully align with our spouses first and be on the same page. I think that's really key in how you approach the whole family dynamic. You also have to really work on individual relationships with each child. With your spouse also has to work on individual relationships with each child, and just really embracing a dynamic feeling of empathy towards everybody in the situation. I think it calls for you as a mom in particular to really have empathy for their biological mother and what she might be feeling and experiencing. So for me, it's just an incredible way that we've been able to love more and really just extend love in a more profound way.
I love what you said at the end, where you said, every child is a child of God. Whether it's your blood or it's his blood, it's still a child of God. What a great way to view children. In a culture today where sometimes children are viewed as an inconvenience, or they are success statuses.
An
or
accessory.
They're an accessory. They're like, oh, it's time for us to have kids so we can have, and we'll have two. We'll have one boy, we'll have one girl, and this one will play football, this one will be a cheerleader. And it's just not real.
Right.
It's just not real. And you rob yourself of the blessing God has for you, like you were saying, Sarah, of being fully surrendered to his sovereignty. Because if we would have had our way, two, done. And then the Lord said, no, you've never even asked me about this. You never even surrendered this to me. And I was like, I didn't know it was up to you. That was genuinely my response, you know? And he goes, so I'm good enough for salvation, but not directing your family? And I was like, oh, because that was a moment for me where I was like, I'm going to be a youth pastor all my life. I can't afford more than two. As it is, I got to rely on extra pizzas from the youth group to be able to feed these guys. And I will say this, and it's really important for any family that may be hearing this. When I surrendered that to the Lord, I have lived with no lack. I mean, I cannot believe how God has provided for us. I never thought, I never dreamed, I never imagined I'd be able to live where I live or do what I do or do it in a community like we get to do it in. And the blessing and provision of the Lord, wow, I'm so glad I surrendered that.
And I'm so glad that we have 4 kids to pick from when we get old and want to live with one of them. We have options. Like,
It's true. It's true. That is very true. We do need options. Let's do this. Let's talk about, single parenting, okay? Because, there's a large number of people that for a season or a time or for their entire life, once they become a parent, they are a single parent. That's a completely different game. What would you say to people that have had to experience that or are currently experiencing that, and what advice would you give them?
The advice I would give, and I can honestly say that I lived this advice, but I was a single parent for it was a fairly short period of time, but it was still scary, and divorce is hard, and it's very defeating, and you've had expectations, you've been let down. If you're single and have kids, you know this. But I just really was in a place when I went through that I truly had never been more in love with Jesus, and I truly just relied on him. It's like he was my spouse. And one suggestion I would make is I did journal a lot during that time. And I wrote down all the things I was scared of. I would write down what my budget was and what I needed, and knew I was like, I don't know where it's going to come from. And then I was able to write down the answers to all of that and the provision, and I can literally look back in that and see physically where he did provide. There were very specific things that I asked. I didn't want my kids to have to go to daycare after school, but as a single mom, I was thinking I would just, obviously have to work as much as I could, and a job was provided that I was off at 3:00, and I still got to pick my kids up, and I always had enough money. Despite my stupidity of spending, I still had enough money. But two, just even resting in that, the security of being provided for, but also just that I was still whole and complete, even if I didn't have another man, and not just focusing on seeking that out again. I mean, it did happen again for me, but I was in a place where I was content with just being a single mom and really just focusing on my kids and doing the best I could. And really surrendering all of that, because with being a single mom comes sharing your kids, and just surrendering that I wouldn't be in control of everything about their life anymore, but trusting again that God would care for them when they were out of my care. So
Interesting, because it's a little bit of a delusion to think that you're in control of their life anyway.
exactly.
But we get caught up in that, don't we? Like, we think we can control this. We can, manage it. We're intentional. We're purposeful. We're going to be, and you're not in control of a lot. And probably nothing more is real to you than when you become a parent, just how little you do control. You want to, but you probably become keenly aware of just how little you do control. What would you guys say? What would you want the church to understand about moms? What is the church, if you could give them one soundbite to say, the church needs to understand this about being a mother, what would it be?
I would say that I would say moms need so much encouragement, and just for the church, whether it's other women, older women, younger women, men, just to understand that most moms are doing the best they can, even if it doesn't look like they are in a moment or even over a long span of time, but just the encouragement to keep going and just to feel seen that, hey, you are doing a good job, and just being aware.
I would agree with that. I would piggyback on what you said, Carrie. I mean, we need the encouragement. We need to build each other up. That's what we're called to do. And I just think that we probably put off this whole, attitude that we've got it all under control and we can do it all, but really we can't. And we need the support of our brothers and sisters in Christ. And we want that influence in our kids' life. That will also build their faith even deeper. So.
I think there often comes a wall with church where people assume you have to look a certain way when you get there. Your kids' clothes, your kids' hair, their behavior, you're all like screaming at each other in the car, like, stop saying that word, don't touch your brother. And at the end of the day, if you know a mom, she's doing her best. Mm-hmm. Really, truly doing her best. I don't know a single mom. I mean, their kids could be all different ages, all different behaviors, all different financial levels. Every mom I know is doing her best and is beating herself up for what she's not doing right, or she thinks she's not doing right. But there is something in every child outside of trauma that wants their mom. There could be plenty of other pretty moms, plenty of other rich moms, plenty of other fun moms or crafty moms or good cook moms. Every kid wants their mom. And I just think, like you said, they need to be encouraged. Like, don't judge them because their kid's acting a fool. You were a kid once, you acted a fool. Yeah. They're all going to act a fool at some point, but Jesus said they're a blessing. Treat them like a blessing and encourage their mom to keep going.
Yeah. One of the things you said to me, and this is for women across the board, not just moms. You said, most of my stress comes from trying to make sure I'm doing my best to meet expectations. Mm-hmm. And when I watch ladies, they work so hard at trying to meet expectations. And I think that's something that we as men have to really, because it's not easy. We don't see it. We don't see it easily. But we need to see just how hard you're working, just how hard you're trying. And most of your stress is around wanting to meet expectations and meet everybody's expectations. And that's got to be exhausting.
Well, there's a term, mom guilt. I've never heard of dad guilt. And I genuinely think...
It doesn't exist. We don't care.
Yeah, I'm not even making a joke today. I'm saying women are built differently than men. And men literally, no offense, pat themselves on the back for things that moms do without even thinking about it.
Yeah, that's
and
true.
It's just in our genetics. It's in our DNA. It's the way God made us to worry and think about all things. And so when you feel like you're failing, you feel guilt. And when men feel like they're failing, they're like, I need help. Who's not doing this? Like, let's get this done, people. Come on.
One of the greatest ways, I heard someone talking about this, the difference between men babysitting and watching their children and women or moms compared to dads and I lived this. When I heard them say it was hilarious. Moms are watching, caring, feeding, stopping bones from being broken,
Right.
children from being set on fire,
Planning meals and bath
buildings
time.
from being burned. Men, here's how we watch children. We listen for really loud bangs. And if something falls apart, we're like, oh shoot, I gotta get up
And when
that.
when you come home as a mom and you're like, what happened? And he's like, well, they're alive.
All of them are alive.
I kept them alive. Like, what
You're welcome.
what else did you want?
You're welcome. They're all alive. We still have all four. You win. All right. Let's wind this down with maybe a question for each one of you to answer. What do you wish your children understood about being a mom? So if you could look to the camera and say, I want you to understand this. As your mom, I want you to know this. What would you say?
I'll never forget in college when one of my mentors looked at me and she said, Sarah, compassion for your parents is a sign of maturity. And that was a huge step for me in some healing of things that I had dealt with my parents and in childhood. And man, I just hope that throughout all of our, raising Sadie and us, loving each other and being friends and being parents and not friends and just raising her the best we know how with the wisdom and the strengths and the gifts that God has given us. Man, I just hope that she has compassion for me because that was one of the most freeing things that I've ever heard and something that led to a lot of forgiveness and healing for me. And as I've gotten older, actually, we talked about earlier, what would you want other people to know about being a mom? I think the older I've gotten, I've extended that into compassion for all of us as a sign of maturity. And I think if you can extend all the moms and all the dads in your life some compassion, knowing that they're parenting from a place that they're dealing with all of the baggage has kind of a negative connotation, but we're all parenting from a place where we had parents that did the best they knew how, and they did the best they knew how, and et cetera, and having compassion for each other, I think is so freeing. And I just hope Sadie, throughout her childhood and teenage years, extends so much more compassion to me than I did to my parents. Yeah, I think that's what I would tell her as of today.
Oh my gosh, that's good. Go ahead.
I would say I would want my kids to know, a lot of things, but that as far as being a mom, it's by far the hardest gig in the world, but by far the best gig in the world, and just a huge blessing to be a mom, and especially to the people that were chosen for me, and that everything that is good in life is going to be a little bit hard, but it's always worth it, always, hands down. And I love them.
What I would want my kids to know most about being a mom is that there's nothing they could ever do or say to change my love for them, and it's unconditional. And I feel like they already know that, but I would also echo that with, I thank God for you every day. You're my greatest blessings in life, biological and unbiological. I'm just so blessed to be your mom.
If there's one thing I want my kids to know about my being a mom, is that they are my life's biggest gift, but they are also my life's biggest responsibility. And I feel so strongly about doing my best for you, but I know I don't always do my best for you, and I'm sorry. I hope you felt the intent behind my actions and not always just the effect. I hope that you forgive and we stay strong as a family in spite of our shortcomings and our mishaps. You are the best kids ever. You don't deserve all the stuff I give you, good and bad. But if I could have imagined 4 kids that I wanted to raise, I wouldn't have even come close to you guys. You guys are just great. I love you.
We want to thank you, and we want to thank these ladies for an incredible Mother's Day message. I could not have written one better. I could not have come up with the content that these ladies gave us. So my heartfelt thank you for what you've poured in and invested into the lives of countless people. From my heart to yours, thank you so much. Thank you for joining us today and being online with us. We want to pray for you and we want to bless you. So would you bow your heads with us? Lord, thank you for the gift of mothers. Thank you for the heart, the passion, the relentless energy, and never-ending forgiveness and love and compassion that they possess. Lord, would you bless every mother that's out there today, those that are surrounded by family and those that are not. Especially wrap your arms of love and compassion and peace and comfort around those who are missing loved ones during a very difficult day for them. We ask your blessing on them, your rich joy to overwhelm them. God, would you watch over and protect and keep them? Would you move over every household in a special and unique way? Would you let them know just how much you love them, you care about them, and you are in control and you have good plan for them. So Lord, would you turn your face toward them? Would you be gracious to them? Would you smile upon them and give them peace? In Jesus' name, amen.